Okay, I'm back. We're going to go all live shortly. Our numbers are counting quite nicely. It's nice to see Karina online, Deanne Stewart from the US. Deanne provides some real valuable assistance to South Africans that relocate to the US. She's a great point of contact. Elliot, Ingrid Taylor. Ingrid, it's great to have you online. I know I've been meaning to come and see you. Jean-Marie, she's one of our existing investors that has successfully relocated to Dallas, and she also forms part of one of our staff members that's now working on our behalf in the US. The Solomon family, also one of our existing investors. They have just relocated to the US. I spoke to them a little bit earlier. They're now considering some other options for some other family members. So great to have Joanne and Mark online. Johan, great to have you. Pete Stein, I'm glad to see you not on the golf course today, but it's great to have you online. Riyadh, Samuel, Sandy, and then some of my other staff components. But Rob, I think if you wouldn't mind starting with the presentation. Yeah, how the world has changed recently. I was looking at my diary today. This past week, I was meant to have been in Kenya and then in Mauritius, but so be it. Just a little bit of background in respect of American Dream. I have been in the EB5 investment visa business since 2007, so I'm somewhat of an old guy in the business. Certainly burnt my teeth into it. Predominantly been focused with South African investors seeking an immigration option into the US through the investment visa program. We have office location, our head office is based in Johannesburg and Sandton, and then we have operations in the UAE, Vietnam, and we've just recently opened up a satellite office in the US. In the early days when EB5 was exceptionally prolific in China, I oversaw the Chinese operation in the cities of Shanghai and Beijing, but unfortunately we no longer focus on Chinese immigrants that are inward bound into the US for a number of reasons. It's also great to have our two panel attorneys tonight. We obviously utilize a broad spectrum of panel attorneys, and tonight I'm grateful to have the presence of Bernie Waldorf and Joe Barnett. Both Bernie and Joe are well versed with South Africa. Bernie is an ex-Joburg guy who relocated to the US many years ago and runs an exceptionally successful company. Evening, Bernie, do you want to maybe just give a background in terms of your activities, the range of services that yourself and Joe provide, both in normal traditional visas and specifically the EB5 investment visa program?
Stuart, thank you so much for inviting us today. It's certainly a pleasure to be on your webinar today, together with my partner, Joe Barnett. I'm going to start off by congratulating Joe Barnett. He just got selected by EB5 Investor Magazine as a top 5 rising star, which means he's the smart one in the group. I'm the old dog. Stuart, you've been around since 2007. I filed my first EB5 case in 1993, which just tells you how old I really am. But this has been a fantastic program for a lot of South Africans. Briefly introducing myself again. We are a full-range immigration firm with 125 staff, 6 offices. And Stuart, I'm a banana boy from Durban, not the Joburg thing, although we have met in Joburg, but no. Original fame. My other one is that I'm the former president of the 15,000 member American Immigration Association. Stuart, back to you, sir.
Great. And then lastly, I'd like to introduce you to Chris Immelman. Chris heads up Pam Golding International. We have a joint collaborative agreement with Pam Golding. For those of you that don't know it, but I mean, Chris and his team have been responsible for a number of years. In fact, they were the pioneers in respect of alternative residency programs. And Chris and his team have been responsible for the Seychelles, for Mauritius, Portugal, Spain, Montenegro, of all. But a while back, Chris and myself decided that it was the perfect timing for us to collaborate and work together with a dedicated focus on the US. And Chris, maybe you'd like to just say a couple of words as to how you have moved from other residency programs and why of late the US has become a sort of priority program for your group to promote.
Thank you, Stuart, and thank you for inviting me to join the webinar on the panel tonight. Always nice to be with you guys. I've enjoyed my stint with you guys as such. You know, my job has been in the last 20-odd years has been helping South Africans to externalize funds to buy property internationally, whether that's in the UK in the early days. We did a lot of work there. Or in the latter sort of few years, we've been very active in the residency programs around the world. The European residency programs tickled us first. We've been very active there. We've done a lot of work. But in the last sort of 2 years or so, not because we were looking for it. It really was our clients reaching out to us and say, Chris, well, you know, what about America? We'd like to access the American market. We'd like to go there. There's so much opportunity for young kids. Obviously, the biggest economy in the world. And we find that some of the other programs are maybe a little tricky to get into. We looked at the United States and we thought, well, this really fits our brand. Obviously, from my point of view, it was I didn't know much about it. I didn't really understand it, so I had to upskill myself quite quickly. When I started about 18 months ago, but I quickly realized that this was something that I needed to reach out to experts in the field. I reached out to Stuart and we got together, and I think at the end of the first meeting, we basically shook hands and we said, listen, I think this one we're going to work together with. And the key for me was that they have a presence in South Africa. I see really a lot of people trying to help them externalize funds to other jurisdictions, but also to find other alternative citizenships and residency programs. And Stuart's presence here and of course their track record made it a very easy fit for me. I've now been, I think, on 3 tours with them to the United States, where we've had a look at in situ, meet their local partners in America, have a look at where our clients' money is going to go to. Really important that we because we're putting our brand behind this, and we're saying, well, your money is safe. Entrust Stuart and his team with your cash, and with their partners overseas, the panel of lawyers that you'll speak tonight. You're in good hands. So Stuart, thanks very much. I really enjoy our partnership. I enjoy working with you guys, and I look forward to some good times with you ahead.
Likewise, Chris. I'm just sorry we weren't in Miami. We had a trip planned earlier this month for Miami, but that's all come to an end. But so be it.
Yeah. Make sure you put Los Angeles on your next trip, Chris and Stuart. We look forward to hosting you in our LA office. Hopefully that'll be in a few months.
Thank you, Bernie. Love to do that.
Yeah, we're looking at a project in LA at the moment, as you know, Bernie. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to see you in December. But Bernie, I mean, obviously, we've had some rather tough week in immigration. We had Trump do his late night tweet which sent all immigration attorneys into spiral. Certainly, I woke up to a jolt in the morning. I'd watched the oil price plummet to below zero, thought it was time to go to bed, and then woke up to the tweet. Do you want to just give us a quick update in respect of him putting a hold on immigration and green cards for 60 days?
So let me just briefly summarize for you, Stuart, what this is all about. In my opinion, while this administration has pursued a restrictive immigration policy, our president, and I don't want to get into politics here, obviously, but our president, some think, may not be doing a very good job handling the COVID crisis, and I think he needs to redirect people's attention. So he indicated that he was going to put a 60-day hold on the issuance of green cards. Yes, indeed, it sent panic through our entire client base, calls nonstop. But for this audience, one of the very important things to know is that he has not only left his hands off the EB-5, but he has left the EB-5, which is the investor category, open, recognizing that this program, of course, brings jobs and investment to America. Trump being a developer and his son-in-law, Jared, being developers themselves, seem to be highly in favor of this particular EB-5 program. The problem, of course, is that it's only going to apply to high net worth individuals. But the bottom line is we have a 60-day hold on all the other categories, except for immediate relative, which is a spouse of a U.S. citizen. It's a little bit of a letdown, quite frankly, for me, other clients who've been waiting in line for regular employment categories. Within days, they're going to release another executive order that's going to impact non-immigrants, but we don't really want to speculate much about that right now, other than to say the good news from an immigration perspective is that Biden is leading Trump in the battleground states, a few different key battleground states, including Joe. I don't know if you've been following it. Joe's originally from Wisconsin. That's one of the important battleground states. But there's a possibility that we may see a change in government. The election's November 3rd, but I don't want to speculate on that. Back to you, Chris. Stuart.
Yeah, thanks. And then, you know, quite amped that you mentioned that the Trump family are great supporters of EB-5. In fact, a lot of their Trump buildings have been sponsored through EB-5 investment. And just an interesting stat, since 2008, EB-5 has been responsible for well over 1.2 million direct hard jobs. So it's highly unlikely that the EB-5 program, it's gone through a number of reforms recently, but it's highly unlikely that EB-5 as a visa category will be going anywhere. It's very much entrenched. It's got a long extension in place, and certainly for those of you that are considering it as a visa category to pursue, you run no risk that it's going to come under fire from a visa aspect. We're going to go on to our next slide. Bernie, this is really now where you and Joe, I wanted to focus on sort of non-immigrant visas, and then we'll focus on immigrant visas. So if you wouldn't mind talking through some of the non-immigrant visas, we've got a broad audience tonight. And as you talk through the non-immigrant visas, I'd like you to highlight their eligibility to possibly become green card holders, possibly become US citizens. I always say to an investor when I sit down with them is I clearly want to understand exactly what your objective is. If you're just looking for an option to have an extended stay in the United States and open up a business for a short period of time, but it's not your objective to be a green card holder for whatever reason, or you have no aspiration to be a US citizen, then there are certain visa categories that may suit you. But if you sit down with an investor and they've got very specific needs and wants, where their desire and the objective is to be a green card holder, to move their entire family, plus other family members across over a period of time, and to be eventually naturalized and settle down and have the lifestyle in the US, then there are certain visa categories that are possibly better suited to them. But let's start with the non-immigrant visas. And Bernie and Joe, you can talk through these.
So I don't know if we've got the share screen up right now with the slides, but I'm just going to barrel ahead because I'm not actually seeing the slides right now. But so in terms of short term, I think Stuart very clearly explained that it's very important to understand somebody's objective. By the way, before I even get started on that, Stuart, I have to ask you a question. So when you started in 2007, what was the Rand dollar exchange rate for your investors in those years?
It was about R6.58, around there.
So what you're telling me is those guys who invested at that level have since tripled their money, 300% return?
Yeah. And Bernie, more importantly is that I've not had one single investor that's returned home. Not that I'm unpatriotic to South Africa, but it certainly has been the correct integration for those family units. Similarly, the majority of them from multi-disciplines today are all relatively successful, and certainly our rapport with them as brand ambassadors is just phenomenal. Certainly the right choice that they made.
Yeah, you know, I heard all those lovely places, Chris, no put down here, all those lovely places, Mauritius and et cetera, which I regard as beautiful holiday resorts. I haven't made it to Mauritius yet, so I've got to get there. It was sold out when I wanted to try and book. But honestly, I mean, firstly, I'm totally biased, just so you know. I am now a dual citizen of America and have lived in the United States for 45 years, 43 years to be exact. I live what I call the American dream. Sorry, I'm picking up your logo there, Stuart. But I do feel that I have 4 beautiful kids. The third one, 3 have graduated from college. And, there's a lot of things that are very different about America. But what I've found is that the South Africans who come over here invariably, look, the first year or two is always difficult, which side of the road are you driving on, etc. But the simple reality is that the South Africans do bloody well here. Just that's a fact. And the story has been told many, many times of famous South Africans. We won't go on to, Charlize Theron and Elon Musk, etc. But those are obviously the extreme versions. The South Africans work hard. Americans seem to like the South Africans a lot. They think our South African accent is like interesting. So we get a little plus off that. But let's go down to the point that Stuart raised, which is non-immigrant visas. So if you plan to come to the United States on a temporary basis, you're not interested in a green card, or there's a reason why you need to leave quite quickly. We have to look at the non-immigrant visa options. We can start off with a simple tourist visa. That's B1, B2, come to visit, stay for up to 6 months, maybe even a year, if appropriate. If you want to study, that's the F1 student visa. But now I want to touch on HELPO. HELPO. H visa is your basic work visa. 85,000 visas a year. You need an employer to come and sponsor you. You have to be super well qualified. There are a lot of South Africans in the country on H1B visas. 85,000 a year, selected in the lottery in April. So that one's closed for the year. We're very busy right now filing H1s. We file several hundred every year. Moving on from the H, the L visa is the company transfer visa. Now, let me tell you something about the L1 visa that is really important for South Africans. When you go onto the internet and you see, oh, well, I have a company, I just set up a branch office in America, I'll transfer myself and I'll get a green card for me and my family. Look, guys, what you see on the internet is not reality. Yesterday, in fact, Joey and I were working on it. That happens to be a Chinese company. They spent 800, what is the acquisition, Joe? It was 800 million. I can't mention who the clients are. One of the biggest acquisitions of the year, and they want to bring a CFO at like more than 200,000 salary, and they rejected that case. So, I mean, the L1 is not easy. It's generally for the large ones. Of course, pardon me being a little bit arrogant, we're going to take over that case and we have a strategy to win it. No, Joe, I was working it with Vivian, not you. But, you know, what I'm saying is, please, guys, be careful of the small L1 visa, okay? It's not that L1s don't work. I'm going to be a little bit arrogant. We represent companies like News Corp and Fox, global companies. And yes, it's true. We can do company transfer visas through that. So be careful with the L1. Stuart, what's your experience with the L1? What are you seeing happening with South Africans? And can you verify whether what I've just said is your experience as well?
Yeah, Bernie, I mean, the L1 initially seems quite attractive just because it's a relatively quick, easy process. But unfortunately, as they go through and start dealing with the visa issues, it becomes an absolute nightmare. So we traditionally have, in fact, converted guys who initially went over on an L1 and then converted them onto an EB5 just because they were just coming up against brick walls in terms of renewals. The setup of the business in the US may have not been operating as well as they were, the maintenance of a payroll, and more importantly, maintaining a business back here in South Africa, which is a criteria, was starting to become quite cumbersome. So typically the L1s, high failure rate, in my opinion, very complex, and you have to jump through a lot of hoops. Certainly not a guarantee.
Joe, jump in.
Yeah, I would say ever since President Trump came in, he issued that initial Buy American, Hire American proclamation when he first came into the office. Since that time, and even beforehand, adjudications for L1s have gotten a lot more restrictive. Expect to receive a request for evidence. They're issuing now those for over half of L1 cases, and even more are getting denied after responding to those L1s. So you have the regulatory criteria that you can attempt to meet. No matter what is happening, how much information you provide, they are issuing a request for evidence. And so you're going to have to work with an immigration attorney and provide detailed information about what you're going to be doing throughout the day, how you have subordinate employees supporting you and carrying out the day-to-day activities. They really want to see high-level managers. And in their adjudications, they specifically say, these aren't for mom and pop shops. These are for large companies with multiple departments, and they want the head of the departments to be transferred over. It all goes towards, you know, why are you coming in? Why can't this job be given to a U.S. worker? And so you really have to be making those arguments in the application.
Thanks for mentioning, Joe, that Buy American, Hire American, because we're seeing that be quite a problem with a focus on non-immigrant visas and jobs for Americans first. So that is one reason why we're seeing very restrictive adjudications on the L. Let's go to another visa, which I'm going to say I'm a little bit more positive about, and that is the E2 visa. The E2 is the visa for investors. In fact, the EB5 program grew out of the E2 visa. There's about 80 countries that allow for E2s. But the problem here is South Africa is not an E2 country. So, and the second problem we have is even though a lot of South Africans have British passports, you have to live in Britain in order to be able to apply through the e-visa. This requires an investment of about 150,000, sometimes up to 200,000. What a lot of people are doing, we're active in the program. I'm going to see if you guys are active in it as well. First, what they do is they do an investment in Grenada or Turkey. So you buy property in these places, you spend about $300,000-400,000, another 100,000 for your passport. You're in almost $500,000 just to get the right passport, and then another $200,000-300,000 for your E2 visa, and that's only a temporary work visa. So I always tell people, instead of doing the e-visa, you may just want to just go straight for the green card. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line.
Also, Bernie, if I could just mention that the E2 never ever converts to green card, never ever gets to citizenship. So, you know, if that's what your aspiration is, then that certainly is just not an option for you to consider.
And what we worry about is when the child turns 21, they age out. So if you come over on an E2, and you haven't flipped over to a green card before you hit 21 for the kids, they age out, they become a separate issue, undocumented. So we do a lot of E2s. This does fit the category for some people. So if you have French passport, Italian passport, German passport, Lithuanian passport, yes, you can buy a business for 150, 200 and get a temporary work visa. Obviously, arriving with a green card is better than coming on a temporary work visa. Let's flip over from the E visa.
Sorry, Bernie, before you go into the E, I just want to say one thing, Bernie. There are potential tax benefits if you come in on an E2. If you do not stay in the United States for a certain amount of days, it's a tax issue, but that does allow you to come into the United States, work for the company, and you can leave. You don't necessarily have to pay taxes on your U.S. Income. The other thing is that for the H-1B, the L-1, and the E-2, once you're in the United States, the spouse for each one of those types of visas can apply for an employment authorization document, which allows you to have work unrestricted. You can work for any employer. Although I would imagine that that's probably going to be on the chopping block in the coming weeks or months under Trump as well.
That is true, Joe. The spouses of the E and L, but not the spouses of the O or H, can in fact apply for separate work authorization. Look, non-immigrant visas do fit certain people. You know, you mentioned the O1 visa. That's for people of extraordinary ability. And yeah, we have actresses and actors and very famous musicians, etc., that we bring over on those categories, but you have to be extraordinary. So the non-immigrant visa categories, yes, they do fit a small number of South Africans. The bottom line I wanted to summarize on the L1 is that if the South African company has less than 50 employees and the US company has less than 25 employees, that's not going to be an easy case to convert. And you know, having 25, 30 employees in the United States costs you millions and millions of dollars in payroll. So clearly, I'm punting other options. And Stuart, I don't know if you have any more questions about the non-immigrant visa categories.
No, I think we're now going to move across to the immigrant visas. So we start with most probably one of the easiest ones is just to simply apply for the DV lottery.
Well, look, I tell everybody that I do like the lottery. Many of you have friends who've won the lottery. The lottery does work. They give away 50,000 visas every year. That is in October or November. But when people come to me and they say, I want you to apply for a green card for me through the lottery, I generally say to them, forget about it. Go to travel.state.gov in October, fill out the form and file it. It's not a strategy. It's a lottery. It's called a game of chance. Your chances of winning are 0.0001%. And, you know, if you're looking for a way to get out, yeah, do it. Why not? But if you think that this is an option that is realistic, I don't push the lottery as a viable strategy. I do push it as a game of chance, and I encourage South Africans to do it because it's free. By the way, if you go to a lottery website and at the end of it they ask for money, you are not on the government website, okay? So a lot of South Africans are getting scammed. It really hurts me, Stuart, seriously. I get calls from these people, oh, I won the lottery and I won the lottery, they want more money, they want more money. And I'm like, oh, crap, pardon my French. You know, there's a lot of snakes and shysters. Please be careful with the lottery, guys.
Correct. Bernie, we now move on to the family-based visas.
So let's talk about family immigration, and here's the bottom line. There's two basic types of family immigration: immediate relative. So many of the, pardon, I hope I'm politically correct here, beautiful South African girls go over to South Africa and they meet Americans and they get married. And that is a viable category if you fall in love. No phony marriage is not in my door, because it basically takes 4 or 5 years anyway to get a green card. That's the immediate relative category. And yes, that category remains viable. What President Trump has done with this latest executive order is absolutely shocking, to be honest, because he has stripped away all of the family-based categories: first preference, second preference, third preference, fourth preference. These are the sibling category is currently closed. I am the U.S. citizen, child of an American citizen, first preference closed. Second preference, I'm the spouse or child of a green card holder, closed. Third preference, married child of U.S. citizen, closed. I cannot believe he's closed down all these these categories, but as I say, being a developer, they left open the EB5 category, and supposedly this is a 60-day temporary hold. Let's see. I think they will probably renew it. I'm not happy about it. And this, quite frankly, is effective as of midnight tonight, the 23rd. Are you already in the 23rd? So this was a shocking thing where he basically closed down all the family law categories other than spouse of a U.S. citizen, spouse or child of a U.S. citizen. Joe, you helped me write the blog on this. What have you got to add?
Yeah, I actually don't find it very shocking, to be honest. It seems like family-based immigration has been on the chopping block since Trump came into the office. I know there's been some legislation to try to change our immigration system to a merit-based system. And the argument from that point of view is that family-based is not, does not have merit. They want to get other people in the United States who will help our economy. So you are correct. They have shut it down, the issuance of visas. That doesn't mean that you cannot still apply to sponsor a family-based member. But once that gets approved through an I-130, there are, at this time, there are restrictions from being able to activate that and actually get the visa to get the green card.
I will caution, though, people filing I-130s, immigrant petitions in waiting line, that can also impact your ability to get a student visa or visitor's visa. So you really need to work out what Stuart was saying from the beginning, have a comprehensive strategy, know exactly where you're going from the beginning. Stuart?
Yeah. Bernie, if you could just give us some guidelines. I mean, in best case scenario, he lifts the ban. If I was a green card holder and I wanted to get my parents into the US, I'm a child and I'm wanting to bring my biological parents into the US. What sort of timing would that?
Well, let's assume that the current hold is lifted. If you're a green card holder, and let's forget about the temporary hold, the only person you can sponsor is your newly acquired spouse. And your children under the age of 21, children over 21 are in the F2B category, which is a longer category. The bottom line is if you have a green card, very limited sponsorship. Once you become an American citizen, or as in my case, a dual citizen, South Africa with permission does allow 2 passports, but you have to apply for special permission. And then once you're an American citizen under the regular law, you can petition for your parents, but we also have some obstacles in that area because we have to show that they will not become a public charge. We have to show they have medical insurance. They've added a whole bunch of new restrictions on bringing the parents over, which is not pleasant, but yes, we are able to bring parents over under the normal system. Once you become a citizen, which is usually by the time we finish the green card process, add another year or 2, and then people can come in, become American citizens and sponsor their parents. And to answer your question with a one-liner, those cases we're taking about 12 months to process once you become a citizen.
Perfect. All right, Bernie, I think let us move on to the employment-based categories. And then we'll end up at EB5.
Very good. So again, we have family-based sponsorship 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we have employment-based EB. EB category 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So basically, EB1 category, This is for the best of the best, the top of the top. The truth is that South Africa does have a couple EB1s. Those are the guys, when they walk into your office, you're like, oh my gosh, you know, is Gary Player EB1? Yeah, of course he is. You know, many of the top golfers, you know, all the famous South African golfers, but they don't even want green cards because they're traveling all over the world right now. So, you know, those top of your field, yes, that's EB1. Sad news is that's in Trump's put on hold category for 2 months. The second preference category is another one. Now, there's two types of second preference. There's one which is employer sponsored. So you're working in South Africa as an accountant. A lot of South African accountants, by the way, in the United States, the CAs, the South African boys, are well trained, and they come over and they will be sponsored for either EB2 or EB3. EB2 is basically a master's degree category or bachelor's +5. At the moment, that category is open for South Africans, so those cases only take about 2 years to process, but you need an employer, and I'll go slowly now. An employer has to advertise the job and show there's no American minimally qualified. Now, they have to put it in newspaper, radio ads, blah, 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 register with the government labor department. And we think that with the current COVID nightmare that we have, it's going to be very hard to get employment-based second and third preference, proving that there's no qualified Americans. You know, some South Africans have been coming over as truck drivers and stuff like that. Those categories are going to basically be closed down because they think that unskilled workers' jobs should go to Americans. And the skilled guys, we think there's going to be problems with those cases as well. So right now, employment-based first, second, third are all on hold. The top of the top, the masters, the unskilled workers, all of those categories are on hold. They may lift the hold. The fourth preference category, which I won't get into too much, but that's religious workers, and we have done a couple of those, does remain open. That's for the reverends and pastors and folks who get sponsored to work in a religious occupation or vocation. And then, Stuart, honestly, I'm finished with employment. We go to EB5, so I'll throw that back to you and let you on that, sir.
Perfect. Rob, do you want to just flip the next slide? Okay, so EB5, I mean, this has really been my speciality since 2007. There really are only two criteria. The first criteria is that you've got to be of good standing. And the second criteria is that you've got to have the ability to provide an investment amount of 900,000 USD. It was previously 500,000 USD. We had some reforms in the program. So the minimum investment amount currently is $900,000. And then more importantly is that we've got to be able to verify your source of funds. So a lot of our time prior to us engaging with legal counsel and prior to actually identifying a project for you, we're going to make sure that you meet all the various basic eligibility criteria. One, you're not a hardened criminal, and that your source of funds that you intend to utilize for the investment are going to meet the criteria from an adjudication aspect. As I mentioned, I've been in this business since 2007. We've processed in excess of 300 EB5 visas for family units out of South Africa. Our success rate is 100%, which we pride ourselves in. We've never ever had a project failure where we've had a capital failure. And it really is almost a guaranteed mechanism that you're going to get to the finish line. So if your objective is in the next 2 years to begin moving your entire family to the US, then certainly the EB5 is the easiest mechanism. The bigger upside is that you're initially taking your rands and investing it into a dollar environment, which is what you should be doing at the moment. Or you're using some of the dollars that you've been saving over a period of time in the US, and you're putting those dollars to work by virtue of providing you with a green card. From a developer aspect, the EB5 program is a great program. They utilize, by virtue of the number of jobs that they're going to create on the site, they will raise a certain amount of their capex through the raising of individual tranches of $900,000 from individual investors that are seeking an immigration benefit. Good EB5 programs or developments that you would be investing in typically are very, very low yielding. And that's because you should not really be exposed to any major elements of risk. However, when you read our memorandums that we present to you prior to you subscribing, the document is full of your capital being at risk. But part of our task here on the ground is to clearly unpack exactly what it is that you're investing into. Typically, you're in a pref position. There will always be sponsor equity involved. There will always be institutional money involved, in other words, banks that are financing the project. And typically in the US, you have got what's called completion guarantees. So the likelihood of you losing your capital is minimized. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. There have been some regional centers and there have been some projects that have failed, but it's limited. The program's highly scrutinized. Prior to you getting a regional center license, those managing members need to go through a lot of scrutinization. It's governed by SEC rules, it's governed by federal rules, it's governed by immigration rules. So there are a number of layers of protection for an investor. Typically, your investment timeline is 5 years. And once you've gone through all the various immigration hurdles, your capital is paid back to you. So we start initially with the due diligence. We understand what your aspirations are. We understand how you intend to fund it. And you can fund it through a number of means. It could be money that you've saved. It could be money that you're taking out of a mortgage. It could be money that you're loaning. It could be money that's been gifted to you. And we then package it. We then present you with a file, with a project. We spend a fair amount of time going through that various projects so that you understand what its CapEx is made up of. We allow you to get the comfort that sufficient jobs are going to be created, because it's a responsibility of the regional center that you're investing through to guarantee that you're going to indirectly be responsible for the creation of 10 jobs. Typically at that point, you're engaged with the likes of a Bernie or one of our other panel of immigration attorneys. And maybe, Bernie, you want to start here in terms of the filing, the timelines, the consular process, and then approval.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stuart. So getting into the EB5 program, and obviously this is for a relatively small group of South Africans. It's interesting, Stuart, that you've immigrated over 300 South African families. That's an enormous amount. So obviously there are many. We have filed quite a few, but nothing like that. The truth is, we have, like you in the early days, specialized with Chinese cases. We have a Shanghai office, and the truth is, we filed over 3,500 of those cases over the last 25 years. More recently, I've sort of come back home in the last year or two, because I think, Stuart, and correct me here if I'm wrong, but the South African market seems to have exploded in the last 2 or 3 years compared to, say, the 10 years before that. Is that your experience as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. Bernie, I think when we started it, a lot of people were looking at EB5 as a plan B, very similar to a lot of the other residency programs. And certainly in the last 2 years, the plan B mentality has certainly changed to a plan A. And I think it's also the investor profile. These are typically middle-aged, successful business people that are really looking to relocate, reestablish with the entire family unit. So certainly, I mean, the last quarter last year was, we really had great traction. And strangely enough, we started off this year in the first quarter with a very strong deal flow, and we expect that that deal flow will continue throughout the year.
That's good to hear, because obviously with the $900,000 minimum investment, it translates into a lot of rands. But I think a lot of the people say putting a 5 or 6 year forecast that it will turn out to be a good currency hedge as well. I'm not a currency expert, so I don't give advice on investment. I don't give advice on currency. I call myself the visa boy. That's my job. It's a fairly narrow job. We put together the application, we file the petition, we deal with issues of inadmissibility. You know, maybe a South African had a DUI or some little problem like that sometimes we have to deal with. People get divorced, people get married, people have stepkids. It seems like every case has its own little complication by and large. So once we only get into the process after the project has been selected. So that's Stuart's job, to help you with due diligence. But before I get into that topic, I want to hand it over to Joe, my partner, because Joe has written a lot about due diligence. And Joe, I thought if you could just share with the audience some of, I mean, Stuart's mentioned many of the key points. What do you look at when it comes to doing project due diligence in terms of analysis?
Yeah, it's incredibly important, and probably the most important aspect of achieving success with EB-5 is choosing the right EB-5 project. EB-5 is a job creation program with an immigration benefit. So if the project that you invest in don't create all of the jobs, then it's possible that you do not get the full immigration benefit. So certain things that I like to look at are, number one, you want to be working with a developer that you're investing in, a company that's providing financing to a developer that has a strong track record. This isn't the first time that they are building a hotel, that they are developing an assisted living or retirement home. You know, they have a track record of success. Number two, and Stuart mentioned this earlier, it's good to see that a developer has put in some of their own money. They have skin in the game. Also very good when there is some institutional money as well, because that means a bank or that financial institution has looked closely at the project, believes that it will be able to repay that money as well. So there is some institutional due diligence that has already been completed. I think that's always a good sign. And then this goes along with the first thing that I said of having a developer with a good track record, but you want to make sure, because a lot of EB-5 is related to real estate development. When you go through a regional center, you're able to count jobs that are created through construction expenditures and development expenditures and operational revenue. So you want to make sure that all of the permits and all of the entitlements have been obtained or will be obtained very shortly, because if you're stuck getting those entitlements, then the money can't be spent and the jobs can't be created. So you want to make sure that you are investing in a project that is shovel ready or already has shovels into the dirt. And based on the rules in the EB-5 program, a developer can get some short-term sort of bridge financing to start that process. And the jobs that are created based on that short-term bridge financing can be used later on by EB-5 investors for job creation purposes. So those are the big three things that I would be looking at. Exemplar means an exemplar approval is something that Stuart mentioned earlier at the top of the call. That means that the US government has looked at the specifics of the project. They've looked at the business plan, they've looked at the economic analysis, they've looked at all of the offering documents and contractual agreements between you, the investor, and the developer, and they've determined that it's compliant with EB-5. Exemplars have been historically very important for marketing purposes, but USCIS processing times have exploded. Now it's taking 2, 3, 4 years to get an exemplar approval. So a lot of projects that are on the market have stopped relying on that exemplar to go to market. It doesn't mean when there is not an exemplar approval that the project does not have compliance with EB-5. It just means that they haven't gotten a decision yet from USCIS because it takes the 2, 3, 4 years for them to get to decision.
Joe, very helpful. You are obviously, as I like to punch you, congratulations again on being a top 5 rising star. Joe is a star in my book when it comes specifically to project analysis. Joe, you know, there are many aspects. I was talking about being the visa boy, which is my job, to put it together and file cases. One of the things that Joe does is he actually puts together the entire package for exemplar filings and has therefore detailed knowledge in terms of doing the analysis, and has emphasized due diligence, which again, if I can throw it back to you, Stuart, what sort of due diligence do you guys do? You actually go out, check out the projects, kick the tires, and see if in fact who these guys are that you're putting investments in?
Yeah, you know, Bernard, I mean, I've been very fortunate. I've been aligned to a certain developer profile for a number of years. So, you know, we've developed a really good relationship. I understand them. And in fact, Joe is busy with 3 submissions on 3 new projects, which we're busy with at the moment. So, I mean, that's how close our team is. But, I mean, we do. And similarly, with our partner, Pam Golding, you know, Chris travels with me. We kick the tires. If we think a project isn't going to be palatable to a South African market, we don't bring it on to sell it. If we don't believe it's the correct asset class, there's certain asset classes which I like. I like rental stock buildings. I like mixed-use developments. I like assisted living. Those are really good, nice asset classes. And then I like to look at the capex value. I like small, manageable developments. When I say small, I'm saying developments between the 140, 150, and 250 range. Those are nice, small, manageable developments. Where you go into big multi-phase developments, you start to expose your investor base to other elements of risk. It's not just the developmental risk of the one module that they may be investing in. So we like to identify a small, manageable project, and we've recently been trying to only focus on subscribing South Africans into that project. As you know, if you are subscribing investors from China and Vietnam and India, that starts to pose some problems for the developers when it comes to a refinance, because you've got some of these historical investors that are lagging behind in terms of their immigration timeline. So of late, we've been focusing on a project, call it a $35 million raise. We take it to the South African market. We subscribe it. It's all South Africans, all going through the immigration timeline, plus or minus at the same stage. The development is coming out the ground. It's completing. It's stabilizing. And the simple exit strategy for the return of the capital is a simple refinance model. And all obligations in respect of green cards have been taken care of, and the investors get their capital back plus a nominal return.
Stuart, sorry.
Yeah, I must highlight, Bernie, as you know, there have been a number of projects that pop up from time to time where they're offering pretty substantial returns. And I always say to people, high return, high risk. The reality is that the ability to raise finance in the US is strong. There's a lot of dollars lying around. The interest rates are at all-time lows. So anybody that's offering you anything more than what they can borrow from the bank, I would be wary of.
I just to endorse that, you know, as I said, we don't do project due diligence. We're immigration lawyers. Our job is to file. Our job is to get the green card. Honestly, there are, I just can't open is before you make your investment. So kick the tires hard, be very careful to make sure that you are meeting all the criteria we've heard from both Stuart and from Joe before making your investment. So I wanted to jump now to timeline, because I think that's really important for South Africans. I think in a couple of years ago, I always used to hear, oh, you know, I need a 5-year timeline. I'm not ready right now. And now I'm not hearing any more of that 5-year timeline. People want to come over, and they want to come over now. Sometimes many of our clients have had what I would call a bad experience. Something's happened to them or their family or neighbors, and people want out yesterday. So let's focus on this. What I'm currently telling South African clients, from the time we file, in terms of planning, anticipate about 2 years. It could be more than 2 years. Now, you spoke briefly about backlogged countries. There's only 3 backlogged countries at the moment. The first one is China, which is ridiculously backlogged. India and Vietnam. Those 3 countries are backlogged. South Africa is not backlogged. I get a little bit nervous when I hear Stuart immigrating 300 families. I've had to call him twice about this and say, you're not going over the limit, are you? Because South Africa only gets 770 visas for this fiscal year. So I get a little bit nervous that there might be a waiting line for South Africans. But realistically, I can't see it taking more than 2 years, even with Stuart and his popularity in selling out, I think, projects last year, right? Sold out two projects. So getting back to the reality here, on March 13, the chief of the IPO, the Immigrant Processing Office, Sarah Kendall, said she's going to prioritize non-backlogged countries. Now, what does that mean? Non-backlogged countries is South Africa and everybody else. South Africa, by the way, did make the top 10 last year for the first time. So South Africa is now in the top 10 demand countries. So obviously this program is working for a lot of South Africans. And if you look at the outside published time, if you go onto the website of the USCIS and you look for 526 processing times, you get a number of 30 months, which is 2.5 years. Now, they've promised us they're going to bring that down. As a practical matter, I'm getting most of my approvals within 2 years from the time we file, and they are promising to get better. Joe, is that the experience you're having? And Stuart, what about you in terms of getting approvals on your petitions?
I'll start. Bernie, I mean, our average has been between 18 and 20 months, but we've just recently been quite surprised. Filings that we did in September of last year, we have already had an RFE. Well, we've had a whole bunch of them get an RFE, which is almost unheard of. It means that they've gone through their first line of adjudication. And in fact, Joey was responsible for some of the responses on those files. So, I mean, if that's an indication, I think that we could see adjudication timelines dropping quite dramatically. And then obviously EB5, I think in general, has slowed down a little bit by virtue of the 900 threshold. And then obviously the fact that companies are not active in places like China, Vietnam, or India. So I think that we can see adjudication timelines substantially reduce.
Well, if Joey responded to your RFE, my speculation is you're going to get an approval pretty soon. Joey, were those tough RFEs or decent RFEs? You expect to get approval pretty soon?
There were project-related issues and some source of funds-related issues. The project stuff was shored up very well, and the other immigration attorney was handling the source of funds. I didn't handle that, but I will say that we're getting approvals for cases that were filed in late 2017, early 2018 right now. So yeah, that's right around the 2-year mark or so.
But they have come. Sorry, I didn't.
No, I was just saying, and I would anticipate that those are going to go down because of this new visa availability approach. We haven't seen any data yet, but I'm hopeful.
But yet, Joe, you know, I like to give good news, and whatever news there is, it's not my job to try and sell anything. My job is to process the green card. But one of the things that we were a little bit disappointed with is that the government recently, because you blogged on it, Joe, I know you got angry. They had only processed 383 cases for the first quarter of this year, which was below 455. Now, you know, obviously there are less numbers with the increased number, but we were a little disappointed. The IPO said they're going to pick up their numbers of processing, but for the first quarter of this fiscal year, numbers were a little bit low in processing. So we were disappointed because the truth is, like 2 years ago, and Stuart, I don't know if this was the case for you as well, but 2 years ago, we were getting approvals in like 8 months, 10 months, 12 months.
No, we were.
Yeah, that was across the board, not just us. So I was able to tell people, look, I can get you a green card within a year and a half in some cases. But now I have to say to people, 2.5 years at least, because of the current processing time, with the hope that it's going to get better. But, you know, honestly, we have to wait and see on that.
Correct. Bernie, we're just going to go into some of the benefits. We're going to be wrapping it up shortly because it's been an hour, and then I'd like to allow some of the people to pose some questions, and we'll also be doing a quick Q&A session. But really the benefits from an EB-5 perspective is that once you're approved and you've made your first entry, you're deemed to be a permanent resident. You have all the rights and benefits of being an American, except you cannot vote. It also makes you eligible to become a US passport holder. The quickest timeline to be naturalized is 5 years from the date that you made your first entry. And the criteria is that we need to see the accumulation of 2.5 years of you physically being on US soil prior to you physically filing for naturalization. But naturally, the benefits are lifestyle. For those of you that have got young children who are looking to continue with their tuition, you have the same rights as being a green card holder. You get the reduced tuition fees after a period of time. You're eligible to work. You can live in any 50 of the states. I, in fact, after being in LA, where I didn't get to see you, shot to Hawaii. And man, that's a lovely state. I wouldn't mind living there. In fact, we're busy with a project, which Joe knows about there. And then naturally, once you are a US passport holder, you have the additional flexibility that you have a US passport and can travel visa-free to slightly more countries than what we can at the moment in terms of what we have with the Green Mambo. Perfect. The next slide, Rob.
And Stuart, just to butt in here, Stuart, sorry, is that you can live in any state no matter where your EB-5 project is located. You do not need to live in the state where that project is located.
That is correct.
Yeah.
So I'm going to show a couple of the most recent developments that we've done. Hollywood Circle on the far left, that was a $250 million capex project, 400 condo units, a hotel, big ground floor retail section. That's complete, it's stabilized, 100% success rate on that. We raised money in various jurisdictions there. Block 40, also mixed use development, $140 million capex project. It's going vertical at the moment. We then did one in Kansas City, which was the restoration of an old gentleman's club where we converted it into a hotel operation. Fully subscribed. The renovation on that one is almost complete. And then in the last quarter of last year, we in fact went into an oversubscription phase on a project called Arlington Downs, which is a residential rental stock building. And that was a total capex of $95 million, fully subscribed only out of South Africans. As I say, we went into an oversubscription on that one, and which was unusual. We lost count as we were going, but that one is currently going vertical. None of the projects have been affected by COVID, as construction is regarded as an essential skill in the US. And then we've got a whole bunch of pipeline developments, which we'll be rolling out shortly. In terms of hot topics, and then we're going to go into Q&A. Joe and Bernie, feasibility processing R526, I think we have dealt with that. South Africa breaks into the top 10 for EB-5 visa use. And then obviously we dealt with EB-5 exempt from Trump's halt, which was great news, which we woke up to today. We're now going to invite you to, Rob, maybe let's do the Q&A, let's do the survey quickly. We've just got a survey. We'd like you to just quickly, if you can, just click whether you are interested in a employment-based visa, family-based visa, or an EB-5 visa. It'll just help us. I naturally only focus on the EB-5. The other visa categories I'm going to be circulating through to immigration attorneys to deal with. And then we're going to open up the chat box. So there's a chat box at the bottom of the Zoom functionality where you can tap any questions that you may have. We're not going to keep it open too long because we have been online for an hour. But if anybody's got any specific questions that they'd like myself, Bernie, Joseph, or Chris to answer, you're welcome to quickly type one in.
While we're waiting for that, Stuart, I thought I would just talk very briefly about some of the one issue that I'm having some concern with. Many of my South Africans who already have green cards, quite frankly, have not been able to move over as fast as quickly, and they are as needed, quite frankly. From the time you get your green card package, you have 6 months to move to the United States. Now, obviously, with current problems, you know, we can probably get an extension on your 6-month package. It's a big headache to do that, but, you know, travel to the US right now is not desirable. And the second critical point that I want to mention is that many South Africans have this view that you only have to visit America once a year in order to hold on to a green card. And I have to dispel that and point out that once you have a green card, you are expected to live in the US for most of the time. That is at least 6 months. And if you are going to be out of the US for more than 3 or 4 months at a time in the future, next year, you really want to think about filing for a re-entry permit that will allow you to be out for up to 2 years. So please, those people who've successfully got your green cards, and if you're not living in the US, you have to file your US taxes, the kids are not in school in America, please make sure you have a re-entry permit because we are seeing them get much tougher in that regard. Sorry, I just have to give that little warning to many of my South African clients because we know the truth that a lot of them continue to have businesses. And I always say, when you're getting a green card for America is not closing the door to South Africa, it's opening the door to America. And it gives you all this opportunity. You're not closing. I will always be a South African, even though I've been gone for 40 years. People say I still talk like a South African, which is fine with me. So I just wanted to mention that problem. Stuart, are you seeing issues in that regard?
Yeah, Bernie, I mean, the re-entry permit is obviously a mechanism that the majority of our investors initially do, either on their first or second entry post the issuance of their green cards. Naturally, we're finding that now with it becoming more plan A, typically on the first visit, half the family is remaining in the US and the other half is coming back, and it's only one re-entry permit that we typically do. But certainly, re-entry permits are an absolute must. Also, Bernie, I think that we need to be aware that the consulate here in South Africa is very much aware of our plight, if I can use that terminology. And certainly the Q&A that they present to any visa category when you go for your interview is somewhat a little bit more sophisticated than what it was. So typically we always prep our investors. We try and meet with them if we can, and we just do a bit of a Q&A session, because certainly we've seen a dramatic decline of B1, B2s, some student visas being declined, and in some cases on the EB-5, we've had them where they've actually held back awaiting supplementary information. So it's very critical before you go to the consulate to be prepared. They are doing a lot more due diligence and asking you far more imposing questions than what they did in the past.
That's true, and absolutely important. I, of course, as a lawyer, call it ensuring that my clients meet legal sufficiency. So we do have to prepare all of our clients before interviews, make sure that they are familiar with the project, with the investment, with the path of funds. Stuart, I want to pick up only one, sorry I'm talking so much, but one really fantastic benefit, which you did mention in passing, but I'm going to be a little bit of a braggart here. We represent a lot of the universities in California. In fact, I represent the UCOP, the Office of the President, all 10 of the campuses, and help them with immigration and residency issues. So once you have a green card, let's assume you live in California, you, like Joey and me, get to see and live in the beautiful California, Southern California. The tuition for somebody who is got a green card and has been in the United States for at least 1 year and has paid some taxes is about $25,000 a year. If you do not have a green card, anticipate paying something like $60,000 a year. So we're talking about a saving of $40,000 a year. And colleges, 4 years here, I mean, just add this up. You can potentially save hundreds of thousands of dollars by being a resident as opposed being in the United States on an F1 student visa. So I just want to mention that because there's a lot of South Africans in America on student visas, a ton of them. And the parents don't even know that if they had done this EB-5 thing and these kids were eligible for in-state tuition as a resident, they end up saving a phenomenal amount of money. So I just want to punt that one because it's one that a lot of people don't know about.
Great. Bernie, we've got a question directed at you. How easy is it to convert an H-1B visa to a green card?
Well, the truth is we do that all the time. So if you're on an H-1B, and that's what I was talking about earlier, actually, it's tragic. I mean, I'm shocked, just so you know, that President Trump, as of today, has closed down the EB2 and EB3 category, at least for the next 60 days. Now, he did say he may extend it. But his whole point is, why should I let in foreigners when we have to rebuild America? Now, I'm hoping he's going to change it, but honestly, I don't trust him on these issues. For example, they put in a Muslim ban that was supposed to be temporary, except it's 1,200 days old. He's put in bans, he's never lifted any bans. But as of today, converting an H1 to a green card through EB2 and 3 is impossible in the next 60 days unless you are already in the US and in process. If you're in the US and in process, fine. If you're waiting to pick up your EB2 or EB3 visa in Johannesburg in the next 60 days, I will tell you your chances are zero, not even 1%, because he has suspended all green card processing for these categories. This was shocking news that we blogged on last night. So I'm hopeful that this will get better, but as of today, I could not legally sign up that case. Maybe I could legally sign it up, but I would have to fully disclose that the door is currently closed, and we're just hoping that it'll be open again. So sorry for the long answer, but it's a terrible situation we have on converting H's to green cards as of the present time.
Perfect. Bernie, I think we're going to wrap it up. We've been on for about an hour and 15 minutes. We like to try and keep these down to an hour, but I think we covered a large base. I wanted it to be a little bit more informative than just EB-5, and I think both yourself and Joe have really given us a nice overview of all the various visa categories, and we look forward to engaging with you. We will be sending you, everybody who registered, their contact numbers. We have made a full recording of this webinar, which everybody will receive tomorrow. And then hopefully we can assist some of the people that joined us this evening. And once again, everybody, thank you very much for your time. I know tonight was a bit of an awkward time with the president's announcement. So when I log off, I'll go see what lies ahead for us. Bernie and Joe, I hope you guys stay safe.
Thank you, Stuart.
I look forward to seeing you guys when I get my wings back and when I'm allowed to travel again.
Yeah, come and join us, Stuart. It would be a great pleasure. I hope that we'll do this again. Maybe we can do one a month, one every 2 months, keep everybody up to date on all the latest and greatest news. So I do want to just do my standard legal thing that any information we give today is not legal advice. If you need legal advice, you need to consult with a lawyer individually. We do not endorse projects. We are simply, as I say, the visa boy, and I say that with pride. So thank you so much, Stuart, for the opportunity.
Thanks to our strategic partner, Chris Zimmerman from Pam Golding, for making himself available as well.
Pleasure.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks very much, Stuart.